Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Raw Talk with Sheena. It feels very interesting to be back after a little hiatus. If this is the first time that you're tuning in, I've taken a little break. It's been very nice. I hope during that time you've been able to reflect back on some of the past episodes or check out some other cool podcasts. And I know that some people are interested in hearing what the break was about and all of those types of things. And honestly, if I had to give a reason to the break, I'd probably be making something up because it kind of happened organically and then the time kind of expanded. At the same time, I took a break from social media and all of those things just felt really good in the moment. And during that time, I was able to reflect on this podcast and the information that I provide and the way that I provided it. And it felt really good to do some reflecting. And I feel like it's giving me a new wave of confidence moving forward, because when you do something like this in a public forum, there's a lot of personal thought processing that happens about yourself. So a lot of vulnerability and a lot of questioning the way that you're doing things. This is for me personally, maybe not for other people. So a lot of comparisons and, everyone else in the wellness field is doing things this way. Should I be sounding this way? Should I be promoting this product? Should I be formatting things like this? And that dialogue didn't feel good for me. So I needed to take a step back and recognize the parts of it that I do enjoy and the parts of it that I am good at. And my listeners, you guys have been really amazing about letting me know the parts of Raw Talk with Sheena that you've missed and that you look forward to hearing in the future. And that's helped. But mostly what's been the most inspirational has just been this time with me, canceling out some of the noise of social media and canceling out some of the noise of the comparisons that I've had with myself in relation to other people who are doing podcasts and blogs and other things. So I'm hoping that this new season of Raw Talk with Sheena feels a little bit more developed. I'm hoping that I seem a little bit more developed. I'm hoping that I can provide an openness to you listeners, while also feeling like I have some stability. I want to provide that same transparency that I expect of my guests, but also feel like I have a protected sense of self as I'm developing and as I'm growing. So that's really all I have in terms of the break. Another thing is that I really want this podcast to be supported. I want it to be something that I receive energy from as well. So there may be some restructuring in the upcoming episodes. I started a Patreon account. So if you feel called to support financially, you can do that there. I'll put the link in the show notes. And also restructuring. There was something else that came to mind, but I'm forgetting it at this moment. So, yeah, I think it's lost me. Yeah, so maybe the episodes are not going to come out every week. Maybe it's going to be every other week. So the restructuring may be an unstructuring as well. I want this to feel very organic for me because I want to continue to enjoy the interviews. I want to continue to enjoy that which I do share from my personal experience. And I want to interact with you a little bit more. And I also want to feel that you're interacting with me. So if there's an episode that really speaks to you, sharing it is greatly appreciated. Writing a review is greatly appreciated. And of course, sponsoring on Patreon would be amazing. So I think that's all I have for today. I appreciate you guys sticking with me through my break. I've enjoyed it a lot. I'm going to take more. And let me introduce this week's guests. He is my life coach. He is my partner in life and businesses life coach. And I call him that because working with him doesn't feel like traditional therapy. However, his name is Dr. Tim Kershenstine, and he does have a PhD in clinical psychology from the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology in Palo Alto, California. He's also worked with master therapist Suzanne Shabood, PhD, OCD and hoarding specialist. She's seen on A&E's Hoarders. Love that show, side note. And he's also kind of done his own in-depth training with somatic psychology, existential psychology, and Eastern philosophy. So he has a very wide range of experience in this therapy and coaching world. He gives a really incredible perspective on the difference between the both and just the importance of taking that time to talk about some things that are developing in one's life. And he's been very integral in my journey, in my partner's journey, in our journey together. I find that sometimes while I like to allow things to develop just in my own energy field, sometimes it is helpful to have someone else there, especially when you're in a relationship, I find, whether it's business or personal, because sometimes there's just coming from two different bodies, sometimes the communication doesn't always reach the intention, and having someone, a third party perspective, can be really helpful. And then also when you're working with someone individually, sometimes your perspective is very focused and linear, and having someone who can potentially offer a different perspective can be incredibly helpful as well. And that's been true in my experience. So I know that you guys are going to love hearing from Dr. Tim. I love hearing from him. Let me know what you think and enjoy this episode.
You're listening to a fresh new podcast on healing, spiritual development, nutrition, energy work, and sometimes aliens. From the owner of the celebrity-acclaimed Raw Republic Juice Bar and Wellness Center in New Orleans, Louisiana, Sheena Manina. Yes, that's her real name. This is Raw Talk with Sheena.
So welcome to Raw Talk with Sheena, everyone. This is a very special guest and someone who I've been debating whether or not to have on the podcast because he's my life coach, and I don't want him to get too busy to not be able to include me in his weekly schedule. But this is Tim, and Tim has been an incredibly integral part of my transformation recently, and has been really important in me finding a safe and comfortable place to begin expressing things that I had for a long time just kind of kept in, and not in a way that I even knew that it was happening. And so Tim and I talk a lot about the fact that it's really important that when you're working with coaches that you're ready to begin expressing some of these things and working through some of these things. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. But first, I want you to kind of talk about what brought you to the place of wanting to do this for other people through the discovery of needing to kind of do this for yourself.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of background because it was some things that happened in my life that were very, were the catalyst to me wanting to help other people get through challenges. When I was a teenager, I went through some pretty hard times, very heavy depression and just trying to escape and, feeling suicidal. And it eventually landed me in a psychiatric hospital when I was 15 years old. And, I was just an angry teenager. Mm-hmm. Things hadn't, just life wasn't going the way that I thought it should. And I blamed everybody around me, my parents, school, anything that just seemed to get in the way of me being happy in life. And there was this sort of what I call now sort of an existential awakening as a 15-year-old. I didn't have that language when this happened, but I was sitting in this hospital with no shoelaces, no belt, and just kind of pretty upset about being there. Yeah. And it just hit me that I couldn't blame anybody but myself for being in this situation. And from that moment on, I decided if my life was going to get better and I was going to be happy in it, the only person who could make that happen was me. Yeah. And so I really just sort of took that as I'm going to turn things around. And I had purpose. Yeah. And that purpose drove me. And
what was that, though, at that time?
The purpose was I wanted to feel better in my life, and I was going to do whatever it took to get there. And so I started, just taking advantage of the resources that I had. I was fortunate enough to have a psychiatrist that I worked with who was kind of old school, did psychoanalysis, Freudian.
Like you got electrocuted?
No, none of that. She was really quite wonderful in that what she did was made me have to work for it. She never gave me the answers. Sometimes we'd sit in silence for maybe a half an hour and she wouldn't say anything because she would leave it up to me to take the initiative. And I started to realize that's what was making me feel better, that I was becoming the actor in my life. I wasn't waiting for somebody else to do it. I wasn't waiting for the answers to come. I was going out and finding them. And when I realized how she helped me do that, I was like, I want to do this for other people. I want to help other people, get through the challenges so they can feel empowered and happy again. And so that's really how it started for me. And, ever since then, it was just a journey. Psychology was the only way I knew to go. So that's what I did in college, graduate school, and got my PhD in clinical psychology and have gone a non-clinical route since then. And it's been been a great journey. So a lot of
education, but the way that we became connected was my boyfriend Evan's aunt did a training with you in California, correct?
That's right.
And that was completely outside of the educational system.
That was a training I did on my own. It wasn't part of my graduate school. It was a Somatic Experiencing was the modality that I was training in. And it's something that's for helping people deal with trauma by learning how to help the nervous system be able to work it out. And it was a really wonderful training. And, Evan's aunt is an amazing person. We connected because she was from New Orleans. And, we had that connection out in California. And she's a wonderful person.
She's amazing. I love Marlette. You guys will meet her one day for sure. But what I find really interesting, Tim, is that people still need, nowadays, especially people of my parents' generation, they still really connect with someone having that educational background. And the first time that I met you, I was like, how much of this, I was definitely tuning into how much of this is regimented, how into a box is he going to try to fit me, and how programmed is his approach going to be in trying to help me. And the case was that there were none of those boxes, which told me immediately that you weren't healing on the same program that that I'm traditionally used to in psychological and psychiatric environments. And so this is what a lot of my listeners are interested in knowing is what is the difference between that sort of practice and then the practice that we kind of deem life coaching nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm actually, it means a lot to me to hear that that's your experience because I work really hard to be natural and authentic and really meet, what's happening in the moment. And having things very regimented and boxed in is very the antithesis of what I want to be in my work, because I see it a little bit differently. And that's why I also say, like, coaching is the best name that I have for what I do, because I don't work in a clinical realm. I'm not a licensed psychologist. I chose to go this non-clinical route because philosophically it felt really important to me. And coaching is the best name, but I teach. I consult, and because of the wealth of education I've been fortunate to have, I have some things to offer in that. And so it's not, I don't just coach, but I consult, I support, and I think that the best way I can describe in simple terms what I do is have meaningful conversations with people and develop a trusting relationship, and in that that person is the agent that begins to find their healing very organically. That's the strongest thing that even in psychological research on researching psychotherapies and seeing what psychotherapy is good for this problem, on and on. And the biggest effect that they notice, no matter what therapy is being done, because the truth is there's no scientific evidence that says one therapy is better than another. But what they have found is the biggest determinant for positive results in therapy have been the relationship that is developed between therapist and client. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about therapy right now because that's the research that I know that's been done. But I think that these kind of meaningful relationships are developed in, more than just the arena of psychotherapy, but between coaches, between consultants and clients. I mean, it might even be, your lawyer and you who have a wonderful relationship, and just talking about things helps you just feel better or get a different perspective.
Yeah. Or if someone has like a mentor.
Yes,
it's just
absolutely.
kind of that, like, this isn't really programmed into our society as ways, like, we don't just spend, like free time with people. Like, it was available, I guess, or it is available in indigenous tribes and people who live in community settings. Like, this is why I'm constantly pushing my audience toward finding the person that they can communicate with and they can connect with, because that space providing you to just experience, express, release, talk about things, like, it's so transformational, and it's also so simple.
Yes.
So what would have been the difference in if you had gone, like, continued going, or you are trained so traditionally? Mm-hmm. Like, give me an example. And you are specifically trained to help people with OCD.
Well, I've been working with people with OCD for about 8 years because I started working with Dr. Suzanne Chabot here in New Orleans at the OCD Institute of Greater New Orleans. And she taught me everything there is to know about working with OCD. And then my years of experience getting to know lots of people with OCD has just really helped me understand that particular animal really intimately, so that I've really learned how to help people understand the way that it operates in their life so that they can begin developing their own way of learning how to confront it and feel more empowered. And OCD is so interesting too, because I think it's an exaggeration or a magnification is maybe a better word of the human condition, because we're all afraid of things that are uncertain in the world, and that provokes anxiety in all of us, uncertainty. And OCD is a magnification of that concern and trying to control for it. And ultimately, it's just part of our existence. We would do best learning how to meet uncertainty with courage and, with the willingness to put ourselves out there and meet the possibilities that are, available in our lives.
Yeah, the way that I think about OCD is the similar way that I think about addiction. I feel like we all have that capacity in us, right?
Sure.
We all have that same brain patterning, like you were just describing. We all have fears. We all have these persistent thoughts that sometimes don't make sense. And I think that that's another thing that makes you so good at what you do, is that you have such a deep understanding of, like, when it's expressed so outwardly that to society, something's gone wrong, like, then you've studied it from that perspective. However, like, I feel like we're all experiencing this.
Sure. I think for instance, in meditation, a lot of the practice is so that it can illuminate how distorted our thoughts can be, how distorted and just wild our mind is. And it's kind of like the better you get to know that, the less easily you'll be duped by your own distortions. And the same holds true with obsessions that come in OCD. And if it's almost, I like the saying, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. It means you really want to know the enemies of your mind, which are the distortions and the illusions that we hold. And OCD is a magnification of that gets us really hooked into this illusion that what we really care about is at a really heightened risk, and we have to do something about it, and we have to get that certainty. And, it really requires taking the risk of saying, I'm going to let go and not try to control this uncertainty, and I'm going to see what happens, even though it's really frightening. It's hard work. But I think we can all relate to that, that we fear losing things we care about. And it's learning how that even though we live in an uncertain world, and sometimes we do lose things and people we care about, that's ever more the reason to love them now and to really learn how to live and take in the quality of experience that we have right now. Because this is our only guarantee, is that I'm alive and breathing and loving now.
Exactly. This is no different than many of the things that I talk to you about on a regular basis.
Sure.
I'm so worried about my businesses. I'm so worried about my finances. I'm so worried about, whatever. And then looking at that process that I then create stories, I create scenarios, I create obsessions. To me, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see a difference in, what we've termed a disorder and then the experience of a lot of people. It's just that sometimes we can then put ourselves in an environment that we believe to be controlled, and we're like, okay, well, since it's a controlled environment, nothing can go wrong. We've convinced ourselves that, if we have that job or if we have that right partner, then all of these thoughts we're okay to let them go. But that's superficial stability. And we talk about that a lot too.
Right.
Everything is superficial.
Right.
Right?
Right. I mean, the truth of the matter is, and this I'm kind of taking from some of the things that Pema Chodron talks about groundlessness. The truth is there is no solid ground beneath us. Everything at, the drop of a hat can change, and we're not in control of that all the time. And I think you're right about that. This thing that we call disordered is very much a part of the human condition, something we all experience. I think the difference is in the, level of suffering can be really great with someone who is very, very much in the grips of what we do call OCD, that it can be so disruptive and people suffer so greatly. And so they have a bigger task on their hand, but it's still in the same way, the same practice that would help any of us live a more free and empowered life. And that's learning how to meet life on life's terms, not try so hard. If I only work harder, I'll be able to control life. And life just has a way of reminding us, you don't control a lot of this.
Right.
And our power really comes in how we respond to things rather than how we control them.
How has your suffering changed?
How has my suffering changed?
From where you kind of started the conversation talking about where you were.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I think it's a chance also to explain that suffering is not a fixed position. So when I suffered a great deal when I was, a teenager, I felt extraordinarily better, when I came out of it. But that doesn't mean that was the last time I would ever go through periods of depression. I think the difference now is I can, I've developed the awareness so that I can recognize when I'm depressed. And usually it's because I notice certain behaviors, like I'm avoiding things more and I'm, kind of not engaging my life to the same degree, and I'm able to catch myself and learn how, all right, I need to get things back on track, and I find ways of connecting with people that are meaningful to me, help me bring me back into like the purpose of my living, my mentors. You mentioned mentors earlier, and that, I love the people who took the time to teach me. Outside of class, I was able to develop a couple of relationships with my teachers, like Dr. Diane Thompson, Dr. Benjamin Tong, Dr. Myrtle Heary, just people who touched my life in such amazing ways. So important to me. So when I connect to meaningful people, that's the way that I really help reconnect to myself. And it's this connection thing is so important, and that's why I love what I do for work. If I had all the money in the world, I'd still be doing the same thing, because this is my purpose, is meeting with people, developing connections, and through the unconditional positive regard that Carl Rogers, a humanistic psychologist from back in the day, that was a term he used that he thought was one of the most important things you would want to have when working with someone, that you treat them with unconditional positive regard, that person is the most important person in life in that moment, in that room. And that's something that we so seldom experience in life, unfortunately, is that kind of care from people. And if we could just do more of that, that's the practice in life.
Yeah. Well, for me, I don't think that a lot of people can have the intention to want to care for someone that they're coaching or that they're healing or working with. They can have a lot of intention to provide that space for someone and for that person to be the main event. However, what happens a lot of time is I feel like there's a lot of interjection into trying to help through that person's perspective of what the best route might be. And you have such an amazing way of balancing the supportive element with the allowing element. And I think that that's really important. But before we get into kind of the way that you and I work together, going back to what you were just saying about purpose and having meaningful relationships, do you think that in order to be happy, do you find that it's a trend that the people who are happiest feel like they have a purpose?
Yeah, I do think purpose is super important to, feeling meaning in life, and that happiness is kind of a funny word. I think kind of like many emotions, it's or just all emotions really, it's transient. And I feel like, we should embrace and enjoy happiness when it's there, but when it's not there, not thinking like I got to get back to that place, because then when I'm not happy, I'm calling it a problem, and that's such an issue in our world today. Sadness. Oh well, make sure you go to the doctor and take a pill so you're not sad anymore, as if sadness is wrong, and it's so unfortunate, because we need to be able to honor our full spectrum of emotions, because we suffer much more when we think this emotion's bad and the other one's good. That's an illusion that we create, an artificial split, if you will. But purpose. I think that's where that's even more important than searching for happiness, is searching for purpose. And Viktor Frankl, as a really example on the other end of the spectrum of how important purpose is. He wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, and he wrote, it was autobiographical about being in the concentration camps during World War II, where he lost a lot of people. But one of the things he said in his observations of others and in his own experience surviving the camp is that people who didn't have a sense of purpose didn't last very long. And it was really almost it was literally life or death in terms of having a sense of purpose. Helped keep a lot of people alive.
Wow.
It's an incredible book.
The interesting thing about that, Tim, is that purpose is created in our brain.
Yeah, we are the ones who constitute that purpose and meaning. That's absolutely right. Yes.
So, we can just decide, here's my purpose. Here's my reason for living in every moment.
We can. I think the challenge in it, because it's like, gosh, that sounds easy.
Right.
And yet
I'll
so
just
many
tell
of us
myself
are
my
like,
purpose is, whatever
yeah.
Today.
And gosh, I wish it was so easy. I think that, as I'm thinking about it just presently, that we have to first know ourselves. that when you're really getting to know yourself, what's really important to you, like who you are authentically, because that can be hard to find if we've been living through the expectations we were told of ourselves, how we're supposed to act, the job we're supposed to do, and all of these things. It's like we have to learn how to shed those layers of what we were conditioned to think so we can really find our original self, if you will, so that from there we can get that sense of what our authentic purpose is, because that's going to be, that's the powerful place right there. But it's true, we are the ones who constitute that purpose and meaning, because nobody can tell us what that is for ourselves.
Right. Just like no one can tell us who we are.
Yes. It's like one of my favorite quotes from Jean-Paul Sartre. He said, "Man is the being whose project is to be God." And this is what he was talking about, that we are the ones who constitute meaning in our life, that we give the life and creation to the world around us. That it's up to us.
Yes.
And that's scary for a lot of people. That's a responsibility that's, difficult to hold, but pays off when we do take that on courageously.
I agree. And we have done a lot of this work in our one-on-ones as well, because I would say when I started working with you, and guys, if you can go back to kind of like the timeline of a lot of these things taking place, that I talked about an experience that I had with Noel, my acupuncturist. I talked about an experience that I had in Denver. Like a lot of these things were just kind of bringing me to a place of feeling like I was in an existential crisis, like I had no idea who I was. And in that time, it felt like, okay, well, let me just drop into let me look around. Can my family tell me who I am? Like if I go to that arena, will they give me some context for who I am? Or if I go to my relationship, can I figure out am I just supposed to be a girlfriend, or go to my business? Okay, am I just what am I supposed to be doing here? And I could have chosen one of those routes, because being in that state of not knowing, where it feels like your identity was stripped away, is so freaking uncomfortable.
Sure.
It's just you feel like you're dying, like you have no purpose, because you can't latch onto anything, because you see through the illusion that you are none of these things.
Yes.
And so I think major things like that are happening to a lot of people right now as an opportunity for us to step into what is it that we can be with being nothing.
Right.
And for me, a lot of my discovery has come in, being really honest about those emotions with you in the moments that they're coming up. Also recognizing and having a lot of compassion for myself, which is another thing that we talk about a lot, just in everyday life, and recognizing and understanding that there's no answer for me, there's no title for me, and there doesn't need to be. And that's okay. But through living that way, I almost feel like I get less answers, but more understanding.
I like that.
I don't know if that makes sense to anyone, but that's been my experience, and like I was telling you yesterday in our session, I was texting my mom and my sister, and for some unknown reason, I'm still on my mom's phone plan. I'm almost 30, and I give her an out every year, is now the time that we're going to move on from having a family plan? And she's like, I think it's just some sort of thing that she likes to be attached in that way. But anyway, I was texting my mom and my sister and just saying, we're all due for an upgrade. I'm going to get my new phone. Is there anything that I need to know? And they were just like, no, not really. Just, if we have to change the plan for the new phone, just let us know. It was very simple. And I told you yesterday, looking back on that same conversation that I had a year ago, probably sending a very similar text message, I'm going to upgrade my phone. I remember the self-talk that I had in my head so clearly about this situation. And it began with, do you really need that? Why are you so needy? Is this something that you're irresponsible? Your family thinks you're irresponsible. They think you're annoying. your mom and your sister don't have time for this. Like, you represent like such a burden on their life. And I remember saying all these things to myself. And yesterday when I sent this text message, it was like, and also in that experience too, I didn't really like them either.
Right.
A year ago. Yesterday, none of those things happened.
Yeah.
And I have to give credence to some of this work for allowing those situations to come up and for them to look different than they once did. And I don't know, like, I ask you a lot of times, like, I don't know, how do things actually change and show up differently? And sometimes you have some things to say, and sometimes you're just like, you're doing the work. And an analogy also that I've given is you're putting out the recycling, and you're also then saying, I'm not responsible for picking it up. I'm not responsible for knowing who picks it up. I'm not responsible for when they're picking it up. But all of a sudden, one day I go outside and that recycling is picked up. And that's all the shit that I've been looking at over these past years of just like, I'm actually just, I guess, doing something about it. Instead of holding it into my body, all this discomfort, I have the amazing opportunity of coming to your office and just being like, Tim, what the fuck is this life? Like, what is going on? And just releasing. And I don't know, it seems so simple, but it's profound in its effects. I don't think that without doing this coaching therapy every week, being consistent, I don't think that the way that I'm trying to create more in my life, the way that I'm trying to connect with more people in my life, the way that I'm trying to stretch my limitations and talk to people who I would have otherwise thought like they're not interested. I wouldn't be able to be in these situations without addressing this monster inside of my head.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that monster in our head, like you said, just wants answers for this, answers for that. It's almost like we have to justify our every move, and letting go of that is simple and yet has a profound impact of, I think sometimes just feeling free of that, like not having to justify every move, and, letting things just be what they are. And that, I love what you said. I might have to borrow that about, more understanding and less answers, because answers have a more kind of definitive sort of fixed quality to them, whereas understanding is something that develops and can always grow and evolve. And that's much more close to the nature of life, is that it's always changing and evolving, and there are no solid answers. From the existential point of view, there is no absolute. That I think it was Socrates that said there are many truths but no truth.
Right. We talk about that all the time. Like, we don't know shit.
Yes,
we're just pretending that we do.
Yeah, that's right.
Like yesterday, I came into your office and I think I said this to you because I had heard on a podcast when I was driving 3 hours out of my way to the wrong doctor's office, that on this podcast I heard this statement, and it really resonated with me. And it was that the subconscious mind does not know the difference between a truth and a lie. And so what you're telling the subconscious is what it latches onto. And it doesn't matter if it's true or if it's a lie. So all of the things that are cycling through your brain are truth to your subconscious, and truth in a lot of ways to your physical body. So what are you going to adhere to? What are you going to choose to be your truth in order to have a structure for the way that you live? And for me, I don't want someone else to define that. I want to see out and discover what's out there, learn from experience and learn from what I'm interested in, and then create that for myself.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good approach. I like it.
Because otherwise, like, someone else is telling you how to experience this life experience.
Right.
And that's something that you never do.
No, and it may not fit with who you are, and that causes a lot of problems. That's where what's called existential guilt has to do with the guilt that we have for not existing authentically. That there's a certain part of us that will always know we're kind of overriding what our authentic nature wants, like what our true original self wants in this life, and that's instructive guilt. It's to push us in the other direction. That's the thing about pain, is pain isn't a punishment in life. It's instruction. It's a guide to know when you're need to maybe shift your path a little bit.
This is big. It's big. The interesting thing, though, like what I'm thinking about is that when I first started seeing you, I didn't know that I didn't recognize the way that I was living as being painful. And then when I started uncovering these things, the pain came up. And it was really painful. But then it got a lot easier. It was kind of like I hadn't been looking or recognizing, and I think a lot of people kind of live with sort of that numbing sensation of just like everything's fine,
Right.
By all terms, I'm somewhat normal. Things are okay, and then all of a sudden, shit hits the fan, and you're like, "Who the fuck am I? What am I doing?"
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
So
and that can be a very painful experience.
Yes, but it's also really necessary.
Absolutely. That's what, in a way, Sartre was saying when he said human life begins at the far end of despair. That sometimes we have to hit despair to begin living a life anew, to realize that the way we were going was not really working. That we couldn't deny it anymore. Reality hit us so hard, we just can't deny it and say everything's all right.
Yeah.
And then that's the moment when, if we take it, we can really make things, so much better. I mean, one of my moments was sitting in that damn hospital.
I mean, holy fuck.
Yeah, the hospital didn't do anything but wake me up just because I was there.
Yeah.
I was like, this sucks.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want to be here again.
Yeah. Well, the great thing is that you were placed there. You didn't show up by, your own accord.
My choices ended up with that as a consequence.
Yes.
That's in the way that I was responsible for being there.
Yeah. But a lot of people, and especially teenagers and young adults, their parents want to push them to therapy. And I can imagine that in a place where they don't understand how to communicate these things. They don't understand, it's just like, my mom put me here, this, the end. I think that it's really important for us to teach our children how to begin communicating how we feel regularly, how to talk about, and giving them the freedom to experience these things from a perspective of, it's okay if my child is sad. It's okay if my child is happy.
Well, sure. I mean, I think that's ideal. Unfortunately, if the parents themselves don't have a healthy relationship with their own emotions, it's going to be really hard for them to teach that to their children. And I think this is unfortunately the case with so many of us. Highly emotionally intelligent parents are not something that a lot of us, I believe, have had. And maybe my view is biased because I work with a lot of people dealing with emotional issues, but it's been my experience that, that's kind of something we're all struggling with to a degree, is how do I learn to take care of my emotions? Because too often it's, I don't like this emotion, it's painful, how do I get rid of it?
Yeah.
And if you can give me a pill to get rid of it, even better, because then I don't have to work too hard and it'll help me not feel it. But it's really, that, in the long run, that doesn't work very well. And we don't develop spiritually when we can't take care of ourselves in that emotional place. And what I mean by taking care of ourselves is not fighting it or trying to get rid of it. It might be painful, but how would you help somebody you loved who was in pain? Would you tell them stop feeling that, find a way to get out of it as soon as possible because I don't like it? I mean,
sometimes that's what people do.
Sometimes.
Because it makes them feel uncomfortable too.
Right. But it wouldn't be very
it's compassionate. Not beneficial.
Right. And it wouldn't be helpful.
Yeah.
But with ourselves, we do that so easily. We're like, I hate this feeling. How do I get out of it? I wish it would just go away.
There's no time for this. It's not efficient.
Exactly. And so if we could learn how to go to ourselves and provide support and care, just to say like, this is really painful and, it's okay. I'll sit with you, as if it was another person, but it's ourselves. Sit with ourselves in that place of pain, showing compassion. And not just for ourselves, but when we practice that within us, we can then be able to give it so much easier in the world around us. And that's just so much of what the world needs is more love and compassion shown to each other. But it really does kind of start inside, like that old cliche, you can't really love someone until you love yourself. There's some truth in that. Because, it's not that you can't love someone else, but your love will grow immensely if that love is also cultivated within your own heart with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so important. And it's so important for people who have kids. It's so important. I mean, it's important for everyone. We all interact with people every day. And, I always find that it's been easy for me to be nice to people. It's been easy for me to make people feel comfortable. But a lot of that has come at the expense of my needs. And like we were talking about yesterday, that's not beneficial either. And what I've done is a huge self-care practice and a self-love practice is I've signed up to talk about my stuff with you every week because like guaranteed there's something there every single week. And what I like to tell people is that, sometimes it might look like me talking about a silly situation with a friend with you. And some people may feel like, okay, that's so meaningless. Like, why would you take the time to kind of go into that? And it's like, the most important thing is that I'm giving myself at least an hour of time where I'm taking inventory of what is going on in my brain or in my heart or emotionally or something that's happened that week that's still sticking with me, that I give myself an opportunity to release that in a place where the response is not contributing to the judgment. So I'm not going to another group of friends and saying like, look what this bitch did to me. That's not the answer for me. And I don't think it's the answer. I don't think it feels good for most people. But yet they don't have the environment that, well, we all do. We all have access to you and we have access to people like you. And that's the important thing is that we begin taking care of our side of the street because I'm recognizing the ways that my relationships my participation in relationships may not have been as good as they could have been. And maybe I wasn't in the right relationships too. And I'm unable to have figured that out from a place of just the chaos. What's becoming a lot easier is making decisions in the moment, feeling the way that I feel in the moment, making decisions on behalf of that, making decisions on behalf of my needs, and being like so, how do I say it? Like I'm giving myself a lot of space and air to decide. Like I'm not forcing myself into anything.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know. There's the present moment has expanded a little bit because I've worked through a lot of that, like, what did they call it on my car battery? Corrosion. Like I look at a lot of the way that I was processing and the way that I was functioning. There was a lot of corrosion on my brain that needed to like just be flushed out. And there's a lot more clarity now.
Sure. It makes like when you were talking about hitting that place of like, who am I? And it just kind of threw everything, for a whack and even felt may be chaotic and painful. It's like those moments where, things just, it's almost like life forces us to slow down. And it's helpful in that way. I think that this is part of the function of an experience like depression. It's kind of life saying you need to slow down and take a look.
Yeah.
And in doing that, like you're talking about just not rushing into anything, it's like you slow down, you see how things are, you check in with yourself, and from there you're just going to have access to more of that inner wisdom, your own resources to try to make the best conscious decision you can in the moment. And it's going to tend to turn out better, and that's just the value of slowing things down. I think of it like the mindfulness metaphor of when we're kind of activated. It's like our inner snow globe has been stirred up, and the more we try to fix it and move it, it keeps kicking the snow up, and we can't see clearly what's going on inside. So sometimes it's just about slowing down, leave it alone, let things settle, and then as the snow begins to fall, you can see more clearly what's going on in there. And from that clarity, your decisions from a conscious place are going to be better generally.
That is such a good example. So true. Oh, so important. And I wonder why sometimes it takes the drama and the trauma for us to get to that place of getting there quietly with ourselves. It sometimes feels like we're not interested in ourselves.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know what the answer would be to why we tend to need that, but I think it is sort of a universal human condition that sometimes it does take having to get really nailed by life to stop and take a look and say, hold up, got to make things different. And even though we have to sometimes go through that pain, that's in the way that it's not a bad thing. It's that sometimes it's just exactly the medicine we need. As a quote I read once in this little Zen book, it's like any medicine that's worth anything, is painful or tastes bad, something to that effect. Mm-hmm. It's the valuing of even the tough times can really change the quality of how we experience them. Because I think one of the reason why I moved in the direction of, going, against the whole clinical perspective of helping people through challenges is because it created this sense like something's wrong with what I'm going through. And that to me was in my observation of working with people for over a decade now. I've been, hands-on, like working with people through things. And so much of their suffering comes from the idea that something's wrong with them that needs to be fixed. And when they can let go of that and meet their challenge with a compassionate and understanding perspective, and then work to help themselves adapt to that challenge, to transcend it by their own efforts, it's so much more powerful. And just letting go of the idea that something's wrong with you can reduce the suffering a great degree for some people. And so it's just it's amazing how powerful we can be. And I think it's really important to realize that when we're going through a tough time, it's not bad. Bad is really the wrong word for it. It's hard, it's painful. But just like the lotus has to travel through the dark, muddy water to get to the light and bloom, that mud has a lot of nutrients in it, and it's necessary to really bloom in our life. So that's...
Yeah, why should we expect that we would go through an entire existence without difficulties, without change, without contemplation of that which is happening? How do we think that we can skip over all of those things and just have this amazing and beautiful life? Yeah. I think when we do that unconsciously, we look at other people and say, I just need that.
Right.
I just need the money, the house, the person, the job, the end.
Sure.
But I don't know that as spiritual beings, the people who are listening to this podcast, we're all kind of collecting in wanting more from this life, wanting to be able to show up as our authentic selves. But first, giving ourselves the time to figure out who that is. And this process and what you're talking about is so integral in that taking place. You know, like, I thought it was funny that you said no medicine worth taking, you know, tastes good, because like Xanax is fine. It doesn't, that has no flavor. Like Prozac is the same way. Like there's, and I talk
so
a lot
you don't
about
learn
this.
a lot by taking
Exactly.
that.
That's what exactly what came to mind.
Right.
It's just that, and I think that, and I've sent you some of her articles before. Like I think Kelly Brogan speaks very heroically on the topic of pharmaceutical medications. And if anyone's interested, I can put that link at the bottom of this show as well, because, you know, I don't speak from an informed place of the medical industry. However, I speak from an informed place of working with a lot of people like you, Tim, and I know and have an understanding that we are complete as we are, and that we have a lot of tools within us that are striving to reveal to us. And the less we can dismiss that messaging, and the more that we can jump into what that messaging is trying to direct us toward, with the support of other people, we can feel so empowered.
Absolutely.
And I think a big part of that is with the support of other people.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will reach out to me and they'll say, I don't have anyone in my city. I don't know who to connect with. Like, I don't even know where to begin. I'm depressed. I'm experiencing all these things.
Yeah.
And sometimes they try to, you know, tell me their life story over email, which I'm so appreciative that they took the time. And a lot of times I look at that and I say, that actually may have been a healing experience for you. I'm glad that happened. But another option is to call someone like you over the phone.
Sure. Yeah, work with people all over the country.
We have an internet now.
That's
this
right.
thing called the World Wide Web.
The World Wide Web.
Where we can create our own communities, and we can connect with people who inspire us, who are interested in the same things as us. Going back to that finding purpose and meaning in life, where we direct and we program our life based on what is piquing our curiosity and our excitement, and that is at our fingertips at every moment.
Yeah. Right.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really is an amazing technology that can do good in connecting people. I mean, it already does. It's not just something that disconnects us because we're only communicating through the keyboard, but we can use it to, create wider communities. And if someone is in a place where they're having a hard time connecting with the community and like-minded people, it provides access. And I think that's wonderful, because you're right. I think other people are really so important to our thriving in life. You know, we just can't do it alone.
Right.
You know, it's not wise to try.
Right. And it's an energy exchange as well. You know, like there are people who you perceive to be your equals, and the way that I kind of look at my healing group, you included, is that they're kind of like the elders, and there's an energy exchange necessary for you to have access to the elders, but it's an investment. It's an investment in your health, in your well-being, in your future life and organization of that life and direction moving. It's an investment, and it's very important, and I believe that it's necessary, and I believe that it pays for itself to invest in things like that, like tenfold. It's not even a question. It's like, how can we be signing up to live in this time without people to help us see outside of ourselves, outside of the perspective that we've been brought up in, outside of our society, or outside of our group of friends. And I think that it's even more responsible to find those people that we feel connected to and comfortable with, to allow that expression to happen. It's just like, I don't know. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse when I talk about it, because I'm just like, it's necessary. You know, like, if, for example, with Evan and I get aggravated sometimes when he is not going to see you too, because we share the same life coach, because it's so obvious in times when like we're not cleaning up our side of the street. Like I can feel like, Evan, you've been speaking for an hour and a half to me. Like this, what do you want me to do? Like, I can't clean this up for you. Like this is the exact sort of scenario that you bring to a safe space like you. Because when you do that in your relationships too much, you're not taking care of your side of the street. And it will come through in all of the environments, and we're all guilty of it in ways.
Yeah, I'd say I like just like an overall, we're all guilty.
We're all totally
let's
guilty.
all just share that together.
We're
we're all responsible. We're all guilty, and let's forgive all of ourselves and each other for it.
The way that it, like, if you know me, the way that it comes out with me is usually just that I'm like silently holding it in and like darting eyes at you, like just that's my expression of not dealing with my stuff, is just kind of resentment, and I'm so personally uncomfortable. Like all of these ways that if we're taking an inventory and recognizing like I'm angry, I'm freaking frustrated, like I'm resentful, like all of these things, like that doesn't have to do with the other person.
Right. It's information for us.
Yeah, it's like you're not looking at the stuff that is coming into your field to teach you something. Here's your opportunity. Here are your people. Like, let's move forward and start doing this.
Yes, absolutely.
Together.
Yeah.
So, Tim, what are some of the ways that you take care of your emotional and mental health?
Meditation is definitely really important part of my life. And it's just, I even, every day is not a day that I'm going to necessarily have the time to formally meditate, because when I do, it's 20 minutes of Zazen in the morning. But what I do find is if I don't get a chance to do that, I always remind myself to find meditation in any chance I get in what I do. I mean, it's meditation when I'm just sitting with a person and really attuning to what they're saying. I mean, part of my spiritual practice is the work that I do. Having the meaningful conversations, really getting a chance to engage, in a very meaningful and deep way with my clients is so rewarding to me. I mean, it feeds my purpose and it feeds my soul. And we meditate together sometimes, in our sessions. And it's like, I'm sort of fortunate that my work involves my spiritual practice as well. And so that's where I get a lot of it. And then, it's when I come home, being present with my wife and my, 2.5-year-old daughter. I mean, it's, just looking at her is one of just like inspires such love. It's, something it's hard to put into words, but trying to really embrace my moments. It's like, that's how I meditate when I'm not sitting on the cushion. Because a lot of people think they need to meditate, and sit on the cushion and, whatever they think meditation is, and do that. But the truth is, when you practice meditation, you're doing that so that you can bring that mindset into the rest of your day. It doesn't matter what you're doing. So they say in, Zen, if you're washing the dishes, just wash the dishes. It's as simple as that. It's learning how to really be there in whatever you're doing, no matter how mundane it is. It's actually valuable. It's an opportunity.
So does it seem like having a spiritual life or experience is just being able to be in the present moment?
Well, it's being in the present moment, but you can be in the present moment and be being unkind in the present moment. And I don't think that's going to enrich you. I think it's, being in the present moment is a difficult practice because our minds are all over the place. And, I think it's being in the present moment, but, that spiritual intention of what you're cultivating in that present moment. And if you are present, you're likely to be more aware of how you want to be. Like, I want to show compassion to people in my life. When I'm not compassionate and when I'm unkind, and I promise you that definitely happens because I am an imperfect human.
I don't believe you.
But no, there's people who will attest to that. But that's because I'm not present, I'm not conscious, and I'm reacting off of emotion. My emotions start dictating my behavior because I've let myself just turn into a reactionary being rather than a conscious one. And so presence, I think, allows you to have greater consciousness. So again, back to choices, you make better choices in how you act, because we all have the potential to be unkind, and we all have the potential to be compassionate. And if we're not conscious, the darker sides of ourselves will show through. And that's something that we're all condemned to be. I mean, as this the thing about heaven and hell. There's a story that I really love, that where it's a samurai goes to a wise man and asks him, teach me about heaven and hell. And the wise man says, why would I tell you anything, you disgusting pig? And the samurai's taken aback, like, what? And the wise man just continues to insult him until his blood is boiling, and he's going to grab his sword, about to cut the wise man's head off. And just before he does, the wise man says, "This is hell." And the samurai, being, a wise person himself, realizes immediately what he's just told him, and he begins to cry. And then the wise man says, "This is heaven." So it lives inside of us, and we have the potential for both.
That's so good. I love that. That's a really beautiful way to end an amazing conversation. So good, Tim. I think that you imparted with a lot of information and also a lot of practical tools like meditation, speaking with a therapist or speaking with a life coach. And if there's any way else that people would like to connect with you or maybe ask a question, should they email you or...
Yeah, email.
You're not a social media person.
Yeah,
which is also probably why you're happier.
It's a certain disability of mine that social media hasn't quite clicked for me yet. I do have a fantasy that I could get there. But my website, you could reach me on there, because I've got my phone number and my email. Call me or email me. But the website is OCDCI.com.
What's the CI stand for?
The CI is OCDCoachingInstitute.com.
Okay.
An institute because, teaching people, and, ultimately I'd even like to maybe train other coaches in how to work with OCD, because there's a real poverty of people who know how to help folks struggling with OCD. But I'm not there yet. I don't have a training developed, and I'm not sure if I have enough time to train right now, but
because there's an hour a week of Sheena.
Yes, that is 1 hour that I don't have available for others. Yeah,
that would take a lot, but oh my God, it is so necessary. It is so... I would love for there to be more and more people trained under your mindset of how to work with other people, because obviously I think that you have such a beautiful practice.
Yeah,
and I'm so thankful for it. And I've benefited immensely in ways that I can't even describe in words. My life is changing every day, and I feel so empowered in spending that hour a week with you and myself. And I'm so grateful. So I'm going to point people to the website and put your email in the show notes. And as always, guys, use this information in ways that feel good for you. Look up some of the resources that Tim alluded to, and let us know how this episode impacted you in whatever way. So email me, email Tim, and just connect and reach out. And have a wonderful week, everyone.
Right.
Thanks, Tim.
Of course. Thank you.